Welcome to this study on the antecedents and outcomes of revenue diversification in universities in England, a resource-based view. The aim of this research is to develop a model for universities to explain their current relative performance in diversifying their revenues, and evaluate their likely future success in generating non-core income, and therefore enhancing revenue diversification outcomes. In doing so, this research develops a new body of data to contribute to informed practice. Non-core income is defined as that deriving from commercial third-stream activity and philanthropic donations. The research aim will be met by the achievement of the following three objectives. Firstly, to identify what are the key intangible resources of a university that demonstrate contribution to generating non-core income and therefore revenue diversification. Secondly, to explore how and why intangible resources are related to generating non-core income for universities. And finally, as this is a mixed method study, to investigate in what ways the interview data, reporting the perspectives of university staff on intangible resource contribution, help to explain the quantitative results on their relationship to revenue diversification. These research objectives will be met using both quantitative and qualitative data. This creates a philosophical dilemma. The issue centres on the conflicting ontologies and epistemologies in the research philosophies underlying these two approaches. However, Creswell, Plano, Clark, Gutman and Hansen contend multiple paradigms can indeed serve one study, although scholars also emphasise they should be kept separate so the strengths of each can be realised. Patton's paradigm of choices also rejects methodological orthodoxy in favour of methodological appropriateness, recognising the research question and context should dictate the appropriate choice of methods. The quantitative phase serving the first objective is located within the post-positive tradition. It does not seek to generate theory, it seeks to verify. The qualitative phase serving the second objective is underpinned by a constructivist philosophy. It strives to explore meaning and understanding, thereby providing a fuller explanation of the quantitative findings, and in doing so, meeting the third objective. As the design objective is explanatory, this study proposes a sequential explanatory mixed method design, where the qualitative strand helps to explain the findings of the quantitative. The quantitative phase will, however, be dominant, as the emphasis is on a nomethetic explanation and a generalizable model. Finally, whilst the qualitative phase will be necessarily inductive, the prevailing theoretical drive for the study is deductive. So why is this research important? Publicly funded universities around the world have, for some considerable time, found themselves under pressure as a result of reductions in public spending. This has led to a growing number of institutions diversifying their revenue streams to secure additional income from private sources such as student fees, commercial third-stream activity and philanthropic donations. In the higher education literature, revenue diversification is seen as a tool to reduce the risk and uncertainty associated with dependence on public funding. However, the focus of the academic debate is largely just on the addition of private income from student fees, a source this research contends is similarly not without its challenges. There is also a limited understanding as to why some universities are more successful than others in diversifying their revenue streams. As John Stone argues, some universities are more able to enhance their revenues by diversification than others. It seems that a kind of Matthew effect comes into play, with the strongest institutions being the most successful in attracting additional non-public revenues. This strength may be due to their resources, as Forrest states, although a firm may have incentives to diversify, it must also possess the resources and capabilities to create value through diversification. Enter the resource-based view. The resource-based view of diversification is an established perspective in the strategic management literature, and the key texts are noted here. However, in the higher education literature, while several authors suggest that certain institutional characteristics could create an advantage when seeking to diversify revenues, this research is largely theoretical, and many of the characteristics under discussion do not meet the resource-based criteria for competitive advantage. Conversely, while there are several empirical resource-based studies on various aspects of competitive performance in higher education, none are specifically focused on diversified revenue generation. This research will examine the role of resources in creating competitive advantage for English publicly funded universities as they generate non-core income and thereby further diversify their revenue streams. Specifically, the importance of intangible resources, as according to Hoskinson and Hitt, intangible resources may provide more support for diversification because they are less imitable. As publicly funded universities continue to be driven to reduce their dependence on traditional income streams, it will become increasingly important for institutions to be able to explain their current relative performance in diversifying their revenues and evaluate their likely future success in generating non-core income and thereby enhancing revenue diversification outcomes. Whilst potentially limited by the focus on resources, this research will contribute to the academic body of knowledge on strategic and higher education management, as well as provide practitioner guidance to the increasing number of institutions actively diversifying their revenue streams. In this mixed method study, the first objective is deductive and explanatory, and is therefore best served by quantitative data and analysis. This data will be collected from the analysis of secondary data using a cross-sectional design, as differences between cases are the focus rather than changes over time. Firstly, using standardised financial information submitted by universities to the UK Higher Education Statistics Agency, levels of revenue diversification in all publicly funded universities in England will be assessed using the Hirschman-Herfindahl index measure. The output score will form the dependent variable. Secondly, for this quantitative objective, the relevant intangible resources within all publicly funded universities need to be quantified to assess the institution's relative positions. To minimise the perceptual bias and in keeping with the resource-based research approaches, the competitive profile for each university will be developed from archival records using the concept of archival proxies to overcome the inherent challenge of measuring the unobservable. Multiple measures will be used for each construct in the form of an index to support the more formal assessment of reliability and improve construct validity. These quantified intangible resources form the independent variables. The low-cost, efficient approach of using secondary data also means it is possible to create a complete comparative dataset for each publicly funded university in England. Thus, the sample is effectively the total population. The second objective seeks to inductively explore understanding and meaning for a fuller explanation, and is therefore better served by qualitative data and analysis. This will be collected through a series of semi-structured interviews as they help participants to articulate things that may have previously only been implicit, and create the possibility of modifying one's line of inquiry, following up on interesting responses and investigating underlying motives. This method supports the exploratory nature of this objective. These two types of data will require different analysis. By employing statistical procedures, the aim of quantitative data analysis is to provide an estimate of the relative importance of the different independent variables in producing changes in the dependent variable. Therefore, multiple regression analysis has been selected as most appropriate for this phase. The qualitative data analysis will be performed using thematic analysis, following the 6-phase process outlined in Braun and Clark. Since the qualitative analysis should also support the mixed method objective, the initial quantitative results may also be used to generate some predetermined topic codes to assist in the qualitative analysis. To conclude this presentation, the temporal plan is presented. The plan reflects the remaining activities and milestones from January 2018 to submission in June 2019, in preparation for the September 2019 award meeting. The plan begins with the submission of the RD1 after the DBA assignments have been submitted and returned. Whilst the literature review is an ongoing process for the life of the study, the review in Q1 2018 will identify the relevant intangible assets and appropriate proxies for their measurement. This review will also facilitate the drafting of the research hypotheses. Quantitative data collection and analysis falls in the second quarter to coincide with the publication of financial data by HESA, the outcome of which then forms the qualitative phase in the third quarter. The remaining time is dedicated to drawing conclusions from connected data, writing up, submission of drafts, and of course revisions.